This is a review of The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug Chronicles, Art and Design. And I'm not sure how much of a good review this is going to be, because I feel like I really covered everything in the first two Hobbit Chronicle books. But I thought we probably should take a look through this one anyway and just make sure everything is up to scratch. And I'm very happy to report that it does live up to the high bar set by the first two. With the only real exception being, in the first art and design book, I mentioned that some of the images were perhaps a little small, but really it was only noticeable on the Radagast pages. But in this one, see, like here, these pictures here of Bjorn as in his bear form, that is almost literally a thumbnail size, and it's just too small. And there are a lot of instances of this, especially when we get into the pages with the elven costume designs and things like that. And I mean, this book, like the first art and design chronicle, has over 1,000 images, which is fantastic. But at some point you really have to, this stuff of the woodwork in Bjorn's house, I'll have to talk about that in a minute. But yeah, at some point you really have to say, well, is it worth even having an image if it's going to be that small and it's really, really difficult to make out any sort of detail? It's especially egregious with these books, because if you saw my last video, you'll know that the way they've sort of distributed the images across these Hobbit Chronicle books is a little bit annoying, but other than that, everything else is fantastic. The actual content of the art is beyond compare, and likewise all of the design commentary throughout from the actual artists and crew is some of the best you will ever find in an art book. So here, as we move into the elven realm, you'll see, so like here, fantastic art by John Howie, but you'll also see in these costume sketches, they are a little too small, and especially when we get to Tariel's stuff, just a little too small to really, here we go, to sort of make out any detail. But I mean, it would be nice to have them larger, but having them at all is, of course, always nice. So what I was saying about Beorn's house and the intricacies of the woodworking in that set is, when I watched the movie for the first time, I didn't really notice much about the detailing of his house or furniture and props and things like that, because when I'm watching a movie, I'm really focused on the characters and what they're saying and the story, that I'm sort of only vaguely aware of what's in the background, you know. So with Beorn's house, I was like, yeah, it's sort of a Viking-y type log cabin. But that's why these books and the behind-the-scenes appendices on the Blu-ray for the extended edition of the movies are so important, I think, not just because they actually give you the time to actually, you know, pause and not have characters in the foreground, things actually focus on the design and artistry that goes into everything in these movies. And you can really just stop and examine things and appreciate it, but also it's a real record of the sort of artistry and craft that goes into these movies, because these sets, once the filming is done, are destroyed and, you know, lost forever. And so books like these and the extra features on DVDs are just such a wonderful and important way to record that, and that's why I think books and art books and things like that are so special. Even here with Lake Town, the amount of how huge these sets were, you don't really see that too much because this is an art book, but on like the Blu-ray, you really get to see just how massive these sets are and how much detail and just all the props and everything that goes into them. Because I think with movies like this that are big, you know, CGI spectacles, there's a certain cynicism we have nowadays where you just say, oh, they just filmed in front of a green screen and 99% of what you're seeing is just computer generated. And it's amazing to see. Yes, there is tons of computer generated stuff, but it's just so wonderful to see just how much, it's mind-blowing how much stuff is actually physically created and crafted, and, you know, the glass blowing and the woodwork and the textiles, it's crazy. And it's especially crazy because, after they film it, then all that stuff, where does it go? Into a warehouse or destroyed? When I was watching the special features on the Blu-ray, how giant the Lake Town set, like I was saying, I thought, well, they should just, make that a permanent thing, make like a Middle-earth theme park where you can just walk around and tour that stuff. And I mean, they've sort of done that with Hobbiton now, that they've sort of left a more finished standing set for you to go and visit if you're ever in New Zealand. But all of that physical artistry and the props and set design is so amazing. And so, in art and design books like this, it's just so great to see where these designs came from, where, like here, statue designs, how that actually was conceived and then translates to something, that you see on screen. And so then, towards the end, we'll get to just a couple of pages on Smaug. There's really not a lot on him, but that's because his art and design was actually, has its own separate book. So don't be put off by the fact that there's not a whole lot on him in this volume. For these Hobbit Chronicle books, I've been talking a lot about the appendices on the extended editions for the Blu-rays. And usually when I do these book reviews, I don't talk too much about DVDs or Blu-rays or anything like that, but I think for these movies, it's so important. Like, if you like the stuff in this book, then you will just find the appendices on the Blu-ray to be some of the best behind-the-scenes documentaries you've ever seen as well. Likewise, if you've watched those and you enjoy them, these books will be really fantastic. They complement each other really, really well. Again, this, just when you see that how these mounds of treasure were built and how much stuff, and how, when Martin Freeman is acting on the set, all the coins and things run down, so then they have to reset the set every time. And again, the amount of work that goes into this stuff is crazy. And how they have to build everything at sort of two scales, one for the Hobbit and Dwarf actors. They have to make the props and sets and chairs and everything look much bigger, and then for the human characters they have to make it at a normal scale, and then for characters like Beorn they have to make them at a smaller scale. It's really remarkable stuff. So here's where it all takes place. Tells you about the different departments and exactly what they do and contribute to the film, because it's not just like, I think some people might think that Weta Workshop is just like one company, but really it's just sort of like one part of this giant filmmaking force. Oh, the credits are also actually the only sort of weird thing in this book. The way they credit the artists is really bizarre. They just use initials, so it's really hard to know who's who, and so you have to use this sort of chart to find out. So I found the way they credit the artists in these books to be a little bit tedious. And then we get to, as per usual, there's a little paper sort of extra in the back, and this one is the master's portrait. There's Stephen Fry. There's also a lot of great commentary in here about from Alan Lee about how he created that image. But yes, another wonderful entry into this truly excellent series of art and making of books.